All right, a couple Supreme Court cases that could have huge implications. Now, in a minute, a case that could impact elections, but first, affirmative action. Now, you probably remember this case. We've even talked about it on this panel before. University of Texas, they denied a student named Abigail Fisher's admission back in 2008. She has since graduated from another school. Fisher says that race was a factor in her denial. Now, the university admitted that race is one of various factors that it looks at when it comes to admissions policy, and it's constitutionally allowed to do just that. Here's what Fisher had to say today.
Like most Americans, I don't believe that students should be treated differently based on their race. Hopefully, this case will end racial classifications and preferences in admissions at the University of Texas.
Well, there's no chance of that happening.
All right, well, tell exactly why the court took this and what they're specifically looking at about the case.
Well, they're looking at whether the instructions that were given the first time around were adhered to on the remand, the proceedings below, because they said you have to tighten up the standard and use a stricter scrutiny of the race-motivated factor. Why they took it? Rich, I don't know why they took it. I was just sitting here thinking, asking myself the same question. Every time they take one of these politically charged cases, their credibility is at its absolute nadir, right? Because we already know it's going to be a 4-4 decision.
By the way, did you see what Scalia chose?
Okay. Look, I haven't read the whole transcript. I read those quotes out of context, and he was rebuked by the ex-Solicitor General Gary.
So for the folks who don't know, Justice Scalia read a study that was done by somebody that maybe African Americans, right? He chose to introduce this. Nobody made him. He chose to do this. Maybe African Americans should go to different colleges which have slower basic expectations for the student body and aren't as demanding. That's a Supreme Court justice. And if people ever wonder why so politicized
I don't think it came out exactly as he intended to say it, and I'm no apologist for Scalia.
How does that sound good?
No, but here's the point, right? I think that he was trying to make. I have to admit that I went to a boarding school on this show. I went to Choate for my last 2 years of high school, and there were outreach programs, and oftentimes some of the kids who were reached out to really, really struggled to acclimate to this predominantly white, at that time, school. And I assume that's what he was trying to advert to, and it was obviously inartfully
Mark, you're
done.
very generous.
It was inartfully done, but ultimately, it's a lot of sound and fury, because this is going to come down to Kennedy, and he was twisting and turning already to find a way today to kick the case back to the lower courts for yet more fact-finding, and then it'll come up a third time. There's no way affirmative action is going to be struck down or affirmed in a broad
But here's what I'm trying to get. If Mark's right, and it's not going to be an outright removal of affirmative action, it's a discretionary tool that a college could use, in this case, a graduate school, Mayo. Why do they take it up again if they left the discretion to the college to begin with as a parameter?
1,000 cuts, right, Mayo?
I am baffled by the cases they take and the cases they refuse to take all the time. But it just makes me wonder, would Scalia say the same thing for those athletes at Texas that are bringing in the millions and millions and millions of dollars that allow the University of Texas to be the University of Texas? And maybe those super fast athletes should go to a slower school and bring those millions of NCAA dollars there. But the other thing is, when you look at President Bush, he's self-professed C student who became the president. So clearly he shouldn't have been admitted into the school that he got into if you're talking about legacy admissions.
I think they take it like the reason they're taking another abortion case. They're going to keep whittling away at it. And look, they said in the last case, Grutter in 2003, that there's a 25-year expiry date. They're going to whittle away at it, whittle away at it, whittle away at it, so that the game is not worth the candle, and that colleges will voluntarily, in quotes, cease using it because it's just too difficult to implement in a way that will survive.
You know, if I could, to take it away directly from the legal, I get why that Fisher girl's upset. She wanted to go to a college, and for those who don't remember, and I won't do the detail of it, her GPA and a student that got in her place, very similar. Fisher's was a little bit better, but not substantially so. So they were in the same area code. But she said, why did she get the spot and I didn't get the spot? Frankly, you could say that in any high school in this country, when kids look at the graduating class, where kids are going to college and where others don't. To me, there's a value, and I know this is getting out of the legal arena, to have a student body look like the country you're about to go into a workplace.
That's the whole argument for using a holistic outside the 10%, the top 10% from their high schools get in automatically.
That's right.
But that's the argument for including in this holistic process for the rest of the 90% race as one criteria.
other
And
thing,
you
though,
have to
Richard,
pass
is-
certain hurdles in order to implement that approach.
Right,
You know,
that's what this is about.
That's
the
right.
hurdles
And
that
then
they
as
have to
long
meet.
as they pass the hurdle of not being able to have a race-neutral college population, only then do they implement the affirmative
But
action
they're going to
program.
make it such that the transaction costs of having a race-conscious policy are prohibitive, and the transaction costs being litigation. They're just going to
But
not
you're also
tolerate
getting to the
with
point
it.
where you have people who sometimes only study and they do reasonably well. An A in one school may not be an A in another school. And you get to the point where you're no longer looking at the whole person. So is this person involved in other activities? Is this someone you want in your school? Or are you simply going to say, well, you know, you're an 87.2 and so someone else was an 87.3 and you don't get in? Because at that point, lots of the people who are bringing these suits wouldn't have gotten in anyway.
I want to get to another case that could shake up the election landscape in a huge way. Now, here is how the Times describes it. Quote, the court's decision has the potential to shift political power from urban areas to rural ones, a move that would provide a big boost to Republican voters in state legislative races in large parts of the nation. So the question is, who must be counted in creating voting districts? All residents or just eligible voters? Now, if it sounds like semantics, it's not. Right now, all states and most localities count everybody. The case challenges districts in Texas and is asking the court to count only eligible voters. That sways districts because it doesn't count people like undocumented immigrants, felons who are ineligible, and children. Clearly, Dougie, this is a political calculation, not just because it's about elections. This would change the map. This would change how basically districts would be gerrymandered and whose votes are counted here at the end of the day, obviously favoring Republican over Democrat. Right or wrong, the merits of it, it's just stunning to me as we're about to go into a highly charged political season. They again choose to take this thing up here. It's just the timing of it. And if people wonder why the one branch of government you hope isn't highly partisan, it looks like it all over again.
Well, they either do it or they don't do it. They win or lose. If they take the case, people say, well, they're being political. If they don't take it, they say they're shirking their responsibility on an important issue.
What responsibility to take the case? You have to consider that the ever-shrinking docket of the U.S. Supreme Court, they hear fewer cases now than ever. They hear about 80 a term of the thousands upon thousands that get filed. What are the criteria for hearing a case? A case of national significance, clearly this is one, but generally there has to be a split in authority among different courts for the court to resolve.
They need to clear something up.
There's nothing to clear
Nobody's
up here.
clamoring for this at all.
No, there's not even a split. I mean, this is the way it's done, by counting all the people in the population, not just the registered voters. So this is an activist case. And the reason that they would take this instead of clearing something up on a major point of law in a criminal case or the run-of-the-mill cases, it's really stupefying.
but what
It's
could
really
be more important
stupefying.
than a case like
It's
this?
important, but there's no controversy. There's no split. There's
But
one
how do
way
you
this
get
is
the controversy? This is
By
something that should be.
somebody
by doing
raised
it
it
in
and
the
said it
lower
shouldn't be done
courts
this
and
way?
developing a split among
Listen,
the
there's-
different circuits
there's-
by litigating it the normal
There's
way.
a good argument both ways, and if you take this and you go region to region, you probably won't get a split away because it's very localized. So ultimately, you need somebody to step in and say, hey, this is
There's nothing
either
to
right
step
or
into.
wrong.
I don't
it's
understand
always
the
been
taking
well
of the case.
accepted that your legislators and the people that you vote for represent
Everybody.
everybody. Okay, when women didn't have the right to vote, women were counted. You know, nobody complained about that. Nobody said anything about that. The men didn't get up and say, why are you counting them when we're the only ones to vote? It's been that way since time immemorial. So there really is no dispute, and they do represent everybody that's there.
Yeah, if
so
I don't
And
vote,
if you
they
go
represent
back-
me whether I like it or not.
go
That's
back
right.
far
That's
enough
right. What about the
and-
people who don't vote? What
Well,
about the people who haven't voted
anybody
for 5
that was
years?
of African descent was 2/3 of a human being and certainly didn't vote. But when you stop and look at it, I'm not sure that the proponents really want this, because if you apply it on a national level, you probably won't see very many Republican presidents
Well,
again.
that's good because they're not going to get
Because
it
you're gonna
it's going to
get-
stay the same.
You'd get one person, one vote, and if you look at the Electoral College and you do away with that, well, then lots of these smaller red states where fewer people live than in Westchester County in the whole state,
Well,
they're going to have no
and by the way,
representation
it
at
also
all.
begged the question to say, okay, if we're going to use populations as determinative factors, then why again does Delaware have 2 senators and California 2 senators? Maybe we should rethink the
No,
math.
we do use populations, but they want it, the challengers want us to use registered people who are eligible to vote only, so that the disenfranchised people don't count.
Right.
That's
Okay.
Republicans would be moving from state to state to state.
Well, that's what was brought
My
up
only
today.
thing
That's
is-
what was brought up today, that they would have
Right.
to merge Brooklyn and Manhattan into one voting district in order to get enough eligible
It's
people
just
to vote.
impractical on that.
It's impractical.
And I
as
would
well.
tell you,
That's right.
Justice Roberts, what a needle you have to thread as a Chief Justice, especially in the climate that we live now. But he had picked enough cases and taken enough interesting positions where you had said going into this session, you know what, I know what he is, but you know what, I don't know what's going to happen before the session starts. You do things like this, it just seems so
Well,
patently
we don't know that he voted to
pandering.
hear it. You need 4 votes. We don't know who
He
voted.
chose which ones they
Probably
take.
the
Come on.
4 conservatives voted to hear
All
this
right.
case.
I can't wait to see what the guys say next
Right?
year. When we come back, we're going to take a case of a Westchester attorney who cooperated with the feds, helped them convict a slew of dirty politicians whose testimony they said was critical to those convictions, and is now himself going to prison for more than a year. So I'll ask the guys, whatever happened to you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and who's more to blame? The guy who's an attorney who didn't cut himself a better deal, or the judge who didn't listen to even the prosecution to say, give this guy a break?